There we go. We're live.
Well, in that case, my name is Darius Shanfar. I am the chair of the Finance Committee of the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency and call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Attending today is myself, Darius Shanfar. I'll do a roll call. Tracy Metzger.
Here.
All right. Lee Eck.
Here.
And Dominic Casolaro.
Here.
Terrific. For the record, I think we also have Susan Petto from the board as well. Our first order of business is the minutes, and they having been previously distributed, I would call for a motion to waive the reading and to accept them as presented.
So moved.
Lee, second.
Darius,
Yeah.
we also have Lloyd Stewart, our newest board member,
Oh,
I believe is present here. Lloyd?
hello.
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Well, welcome. Thank you. Thank you for bringing it to my attention.
Yeah. Lloyd, and that Darius, I'll second the minutes.
Terrific.
Okay.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Our next order of business is report of Chief Financial Officer.
Thanks, Darius. So in front of you is the quarter ending September 30th, 2020. As you can see in the third quarter, the IDA received just a little bit in revenue, basically some modification fees and application fee, and the rest would be interest. The expenses you do see were, budgeted for in the 2020 budget, or they were approved during the year. So with that, the third quarter, we did have a deficit of approximately $224,000. Moving on to year to date, we did have some project closings earlier in the year. So with that, revenues were $331,000, with the expenses of $618,000. So with that, right now, through the third quarter, the IDA has a deficit of $286,000. And just wanted to make one note to the financials going forward. We did project New Scotland Village to close by the end of the year. That would be $397,000 roughly in IDA fees. We were notified that they are probably going to close sometime in early 21. So that will change the projections for the fourth quarter of this year. So that's a pretty significant fee that we won't see for 2020. And they're citing COVID as part of the reasons for that move to 2021.
All right, terrific. Thank you.
Mark, is that the only budgeted fee that we're not expecting, or do we expect any other revenue to offset that at all?
Not so far for 2020. The project that just closed at the last board meeting is also projected to close in early 21 as well. If anything changes, we will definitely keep the board and committee apprised of any changes that would happen.
Thank you.
I'd note here too that statewide, there has been a survey of IDAs, and we're in a similar boat to IDAs across the state, with closings being postponed due to the pandemic and falling short of projected fees because of that. So we're in good company statewide.
All right. Well, speaking of projects and projects closing, I'll move on to unfinished business and Broadway 915. I don't know if we want to go through and just have Mark give another synopsis that he provided in the public hearing a few minutes ago to take that burden off of staff a little bit and put the burden on Mark. So if that's okay, Mark, why don't you provide your synopsis of the project that you did so fine a job of about 15 minutes ago?
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Geez, if I knew that I had to do this again, I would have recorded it.
We did.
You did, so why don't you just play it back? So any case, 1.3 acre parcel currently being used as a parking lot, has been approved by the City of Albany Planning Board for development of a 5-story, approximately 95,000 square foot multifamily residential building. Of the 80 units, 4 units will be affordable housing units and 76 will be market rate units. The first floor will be comprised of the rental office as well as resident amenities and the indoor parking, which there will be 30 temperature controlled spaces. One reserved for you, Tracy, actually 2 for you, Tracy. And Dick.
Thank you.
And then approximately 60 outdoor spaces. We hope, given things remain stable with the economy, and there's not a second wave of COVID, and construction costs come back to somewhat normality, to hopefully start construction in the spring of 21 with completion fall, winter of 22. I don't know if Darius, if you want me to go into the benefits in terms of the different programs and studies that have been done for downtown Albany.
I think we can maybe get Andy in on here to just go through some of the benefits and all the usual that Andy and staff provide for us.
Thanks. I'll skip the typical project description as we've obviously gone through that a couple times, but just by way of background, an application for assistance was initially introduced to the Finance Committee back in August after receiving feedback from the committee and engaging in discussions with the applicant. A revised application was submitted in September, which is what is before us today. Again, we understand what the project description is, what it consists of. So moving down in our staff summary of the real property benefits over the revenue gain to the taxing jurisdictions over the course of the requested assistance. Currently, the status quo, the project would, the site, I should say, would create just over $700,000 in revenue to the taxing jurisdictions. The projected pilot payments over that same period are $3.2 million, which is a net benefit of just under $2.5 million to the taxing jurisdictions. The property value increase, the current value of the property as it sits today is $510,000. The anticipated future value is $6.23 million. So the net increase there is $5.72 million. This project consists of an estimated investment of $22.7 million. Shortly after this, we will go into more detail on the community benefits the project will provide. As part of our staff analysis, we work with CDRPC to create a employment impact analysis for the project. This looks at the direct, indirect, and induced impacts the project is estimated to create temporarily for construction and also for the permanent operations. As it relates to the construction impact, this project is estimated to have a $23.1 million impact, both direct, indirect, and induced benefits. For the permanent operations, this project is estimated to create $1.38 million in financial impacts to the city. This project is projected to create 1 permanent job and estimated to create about 140 construction jobs. Additionally, because there was a deviation from the framework assistance sought, a third-party review was contracted to look at the developer's assumptions and the reasonableness of those assumptions, and to make sure that the assistance being sought was indeed appropriate. An executive summary of that report was made part of the materials which are on our website and which were disseminated prior to the meeting. And the full report from that third party was disseminated to the board. The gist of that report was that both the developer assumptions and the assistance being sought were reasonable, and we can go deeper into that report if need be later on.
Terrific.
One more thing, Chair, if I may, I'd like to just go through our project evaluation and assistance framework scoring and just outline each of the points that were received by this project to allow this project to be eligible for assistance. The project received 1 point for being in a high vacancy census tract. The project received 1 point for being located downtown. And the project received 1 point for being within the boundaries of the Impact Downtown Plan and the DRI Plan. Under the identified priority category, the project received 1 point for being a downtown residential project. For jobs creation, the project did not receive any points for permanent jobs, but we do note that it is expected to create 1 permanent position. However, it did receive 2 points for construction jobs with an estimated 140 projected jobs to be created. The financial commitment category, the project received 3 points for an investment total of $22.7 million. And for the 10th and final point, under the community commitment category, the developer has committed to incorporating regional labor. The developer is committing to utilize 90% regional labor for the construction jobs associated with this project. So that comes out to be 10 points.
All right. Terrific. Does anybody have any questions, observations? I know this project has been before us several times already. Hashed out a lot of smaller issues. My one observation that I would provide, I love infill development, and that's exactly what this is. Taking a parking lot and turning it into residential housing that brings more people to a place where people weren't living before, and that's great for our downtown. Any other comments or questions? Or
Chair, I'd note for the record that obviously this matter was the subject of a public hearing directly before this meeting, and no comments were either received in writing prior to the meeting or delivered by members of the public at the meeting. So we have no public comment on this. And of note too, Darius, you mentioned infill, but Andy also talked about this being within the Downtown Revitalization Initiative zone. It's a high priority area for the city at this point. While this was not the subject of a state grant, it was the subject of quite a bit of talk during the DRI planning process as being a very important site to fill in the gap teeth along Broadway and connect downtown further with the Warehouse District and Arbor Hill.
terrific. Great.
This is Dominic. I'd like to second what Darius said, Sarah, and also note it. It looks like that whole area now is becoming like a theater row or an entertainment district, which was talked about many years ago to turn that whole section. So I think with Mr. Ronis' proposal and other ones down there, that I'm very hopeful that the demand for people wanting to live in that area will continue to grow as it has been going, especially if we do, if everything pans out the way it's planning right now. It looks like we are going to have that that entertainment district in the capital city now. That's going to stretch for probably about a mile or so in length, and quite diverse, different venues, including the Redwood project with the redoing of the old hotel and the ballroom, and the project coming from Clifton Park and Palace and over these, in the theater. It's I think it's really, the vision is finally coming forth, even with there's a slowdown due to the pandemic. So I just wanted to say that on there, and I appreciate that we're still getting projects for that area to be developed.
All quite true. I'll also anoint myself as the spokesperson for the chief financial officers of the county, the school district, and the library as well, saying, I think we're all looking very forward to having $2.5 million more in our coffers over the next 20 years. All right. Well, with that, I would call for a motion for a favorable recommendation to the board as a whole.
So moved.
Tracy,
No.
second.
I'll second, Dominic.
Dominic, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, terrific. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Aronowitz, for your time.
Thank you very
And for your
much.
investment.
Mark.
Stay safe.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, go on to the next order of business, which is the Small Business Adaptation Program grant applications. Just as kind of a refresher, we I think Sarah can fill in the gaps here. We previously approved IDA funding for the Small Business Adaptation Program in response to COVID to be administered by Capitalize Albany with up to $250,000 of IDA money. This was done in response to COVID legislation passed at the state in June, which permitted, which we're not otherwise authorized to do, permitted direct use of IDA funds to assist businesses affected by the pandemic. Program was initiated, applications poured in for assistance based on both IDA funding that we authorized and also federal CDBG funds that was authorized, that were authorized for use by the Albany Community Development Agency. Our IDA funds are to be used solely for PPE. CDBG funds are used for more expanded assistance. Applications were prioritized for disadvantaged businesses, for frankly, lack of a better term, with a very wide-ranging criteria for priority disadvantages. Capitalize Albany staff poured through the applications. The recommendations were forwarded to us last night and earlier today for our approval. And I think it's just important for everyone to understand that board approval as opposed to staff approval, which is where this probably would usually go, is required for the individual projects as a necessary component of the legislation in June for approval of the grants. And we're going to go through a little bit, but one thing to be aware of is that the program called for $1,000 minimum of assistance requested under the program guidelines, but we have several that were under that threshold that we can discuss. So Sarah, if I left anything out or you want to add some more?
Well, we're actually going to add quite a bit and run through a pretty significant overview of the program. There's a lot of information here. Darius, you did an excellent job of giving the Cliff's Notes version, so I'll get to fly through my portion, which is great, and we'll leave the burden on Ashley to go into some of the depth on this. What I'd like to do is a couple of things today, and whoever is the host of this meeting is going to need to allow me to share my screen in case that isn't possible yet. So as I'm talking, if we can get that teed up, that'd be very helpful. Ashley and I are going to run through a little bit of a presentation that gives an overview. As Darius mentioned, the pertinent point here is that the board of directors does need to review and either approve or deny each of the applications that come in through this program. That is very atypical for a small grant program at a board of directors. And so staff has really taken it upon ourselves to try to streamline that process for you as much as possible. We did have 62 applicants to the overall program. We'll go through that in a little minute on that. And so what we want to be able to do is walk you through an overview. We're going to refresh you on the program guidelines because while you were helpful in creating those and approving those back in June, July, and August, it's October and it feels like a lifetime since then. So we'll give you a refresher on that. We'll also talk through what staff has been doing in the interim in terms of our review and analysis and how we've scored it to be able to help the board make their decisions and come up with the recommendations that we provided you last week with the packet of materials. And then we'll hold a public comment period as required by the New York State legislation, and then enter into executive session to discuss the financial history of certain organizations if we want to discuss any specific items from the applications received. Staff has some notes that would like to go through with you on that, some business decisions that the board will need to make. When we come out of executive session, that's when we would take any action on any of the applications or any of the overall business decisions. So with that, bear with me. I'm terrible at this, but I'm going to attempt to share my screen.
Sarah, I just wanted to reiterate that the board received our materials for review I believe was it last Wednesday or Thursday?
The 7th, correct?
The 7th, and that obviously, fortunately, receiving those when we did gave us the amount of time that we needed over the long weekend to review the amount of material provided in terms of the applications and the summaries, the scoring sheets, et cetera. So we appreciate staff working so hard to compile that information for us in a concise manner. And as Sarah indicated, today we'll have a higher level review and then an executive session get into any more detail. Thank you.
Great. And can everybody see my screen? I can't see you. So if you'd like to chime in, please just
Yeah.
type right up. Great. So diving right into it, you have all seen this previously. However, this is the general municipal law that was amended this summer. Again, the pertinent points here were that industrial development agencies typically are precluded from making grants or loans in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The legislature and the governor did sign an amendment into law for the duration of the state disaster emergency that allowed IDAs to provide grants or loans to small businesses and nonprofit corporations. Those are under 50 employees located physically in the state and operational pre-emergency for the purpose of acquiring PPE or installing fixtures necessary to prevent the spread of novel coronavirus. We have, as a group, undertaken a grant program, and the sections of that legislation that are directly applicable to the grants are what you see in front of you here. Again, PPE, small businesses, and really the tests are that the business was financially viable prior to the state disaster emergency that was declared on March 7th, that they conduct business in the areas served by the IDA, and that they've been negatively affected by the state disaster emergency. So based on that, we worked to develop this program, and we're going to get into this. You've heard the particulars overall, but you know, the baseline here is that while the industrial development agencies were able to provide grants for PPE, which is essential, obviously, for our small businesses and an expense that was unanticipated, we were able to work with the City of Albany to also allocate funding that would be more flexible through the CDBG coronavirus program to allow businesses to request things beyond PPE. We'll get into that again in a few minutes. Just an overview of the timeline. This has been incredibly intense, like everything with the pandemic since March. On March 7th, the state declared a disaster emergency. By March 17th, at the mayor's request, Capitalize Albany launched the Support Small Albany initiative, where we were coordinating with partner agencies at the local, county, regional, and state levels, even the federal levels as well, with an eye toward adaptation and recovery. One, understanding the environment that was being created and sometimes recreated daily with this COVID environment that we're in, but also looking at best practices, how people were adapting on the fly to work through this. And that put us in a good position for the legislation that was signed on June 17th that allowed the IDA to allocate funding toward this grant program. The very next day, you all approved up to $250,000 to create a grant program, and we got to work designing program guidelines. On June 26th, we did hear directly from the authority's budget office on additional guidance related to the program that allowed us to refine our program design. And on July 16th, we adopted as a group the program guidelines for this shared program between CADA and CDBG funding. We launched that program publicly on August 10th, making the pre-application live, and started our marketing and outreach to local communities, including some of our partner organizations, the Regional Chamber of Commerce, local development corporations, the Black Chamber of Commerce, neighborhood associations, common council members, business improvement districts, really trying to get the word out about the program. And our application went live on August 18th. We had pre-applications marked due on August 28th due to the overwhelming, as Darius had mentioned, outpouring of need for this program. And we held an assistance webinar on September 3rd for all registered pre-applicants. Throughout that process, we were doing business outreach directly to our pre-applicants and applicants, providing them technical assistance on the application as well as the program guidelines, leading up to the original deadline of September 18th. Staff did make the business decision on the 18th that we only had 20 applications in. We had more than 200 inquiries into the program. We knew that we had more than 100 pre-applications come in for the program. So we extended the deadline by a week and provided additional hands-on assistance to the pre-applicants that were in the pipeline to help them get over the finish line and complete their applications. So on September 25th, we closed out the application period and began our review. We gave you all our preliminary review as well as all of the applications on October 7th, and we wrapped up our final review. It says yesterday, but really even as recently as a couple minutes before the meeting, we're still going through the data to work and making the presentation to you all today for your recommendations and approvals. We'll start to prep documents starting really after today's meeting and moving forward in anticipation of what you all as a board may do next week on Thursday, with the goal of having grant awards and agreements out by the end of the month and signed awards back by the end of the year. So just an overview of the timeline, sort of how we got to this point to date. I do want to make a quick note on applicant assistance. This was heavily intensive on applicant assistance throughout the process. We know that we are dealing with two incredibly highly regulated funding sources. And because of that, there are a lot of requirements. There's a lot of paperwork that's necessary. We tried to put the burden on our staff internally as much as we could because we know small businesses are dealing obviously with their own challenges normally, but also due to the nature of the program, this is a disaster recovery program. And again, trying to just really walk these small businesses through. So we had frequently asked questions. We did an intensive webinar. We provided checklists, sample application documents where we filled it out so that you could see an example of what was there. We translated the flyer into 6 or 7 different languages. We made translation services available on demand as necessary. We also partnered with the New York State Small Business Development Center, as well as the Community Loan Fund, to offer technical assistance to help with business financials, to ensure that businesses were as competitive as possible for the funding and we could have as much documentation to support those highly regulated resources throughout. In addition to all of this, we did assign each application coming in a program assistant project manager. So Virginia and Nora really split the applications down the middle and spent significant hours on the phone, really daily and nightly, working with these small businesses to try to answer questions, help them identify areas where they could ask for additional funding beyond what they had contemplated, helping them refine their asks to ensure eligibility, and really also act as a shoulder to lean on in these trying times. So our program assistants really went above and beyond throughout this process and have been really incredible. The feedback has been great from the small businesses on that front. So that, by way of overview, I'd turn it over to Ashley here. And Ashley, just let me know when you want me to advance slides to give you a little bit of a refresher on the program guidelines.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Ashley Mole here. Since Sarah and Darius already did, quite the overview of the presentation, I am going to sort of gloss over a lot of this content here, but we did think it was worthwhile to provide this overview since it has been some time since you guys approved the guidelines and the program materials. So the main point here on the eligible activities slide was that this program allowed the 5 R's, which we've been referring to them as reopening, retraining, restocking, reorganizing, and reimagining. As you know, the CADA program was the reopening side of things only, so that was the personal protective equipment purchases. As far as qualifying project expenses, this is for the CADA funding. You have some examples on the slide here, face coverings and masks, disposable gloves, protective gowns and uniforms. I think everybody's pretty familiar with standard PPE, unfortunately, at this point in time, but those are some of the examples on the slide. And then we list a few of the ineligible expenses that are outright ineligible, expenses not identified in the guidelines as eligible uses, expenses incurred prior to August 18th, 2020. So basically previously incurred expenses, construction or installation costs, debt consolidation, and personal expenses. And I think most of those are self-explanatory. As far as eligible applicants, just to reiterate it again, the definition that we're working with is a small business with a physical office or commercial storefront located in the city of Albany that has been negatively affected by the COVID-19 state disaster emergency. And that's by their reporting in their actual application. Under this program, small businesses are defined as a retail service provider, restaurant, manufacturer, wholesale business, and/or arts and cultural not-for-profit organizations with 50 full-time equivalent employees or less. Next slide. Assistance terms. These are some pretty important parts of the program here. That assistance is in the form of a reimbursement grant. I think we want to remember that moving forward when we're making these recommendations. Grants may be required to be repaid if the terms of the grant agreement are not met. So there will be recapture provisions based on the terms and conditions in the grant agreement. Once again, on a reimbursement basis for expenses incurred on or after August 18th, 2020. So for the most part, we want forward-looking expenses that they submitted in their application. Maximum grant is up to $10,000 total, unless your business qualifies as what we refer to as a disadvantaged business enterprise, so minority, women, or veteran-owned businesses. And those DBEs are eligible for up to $20,000 total, and that's a max of $10,000 per funding source. And as Darius mentioned, the minimum grant is $1,000 per funding source. So Sarah, talked you through some of the resources that we had on the website. I'll just run you through a little bit of the application process. The application process consisted of 4 main parts. First, a quick pre-application. This really helped us determine preliminary eligibility, really a pre-screening for applicants to eliminate the immediately ineligible applicants. For example, applicants that don't have a business that's based in the city of Albany, or they're clearly over the 50 full-time equivalents employees. We also use this pre-screening to ensure that the priority applicants were being reached. So it was sort of a temperature check on our marketing. And it also helped us identify problems early and understand the pipeline of interest. So that really helped us understand the scope of businesses that would potentially be applying for the program, how much funding would potentially be needed if all of those applications came through. Next slide. So, working with, as Sarah said, complex regulatory environment for these programs, especially on the CDBG side in particular, we work to develop a simple application questionnaire using an online survey tool, and really wanted to streamline the process for applicants. Since we couldn't have a lot of in-person interaction due to COVID-19, really doing things online as much as possible. But we did provide paper applications available on the website if folks needed them, and translation services were available for applicants who needed them. Really, the mark here is that we provided a tremendous amount of technical assistance throughout the application process to get them through these documents. What you see here on the slide is the budget worksheet. This was a required form as part of the application, and this really helped us to clarify both the applicant's request and determine eligibility of the uses of funds and reasonableness of specific line items, as well as it also provides valuable data regarding local business needs that can assist in future recovery efforts, because we have it done by those 5 R's, so we know where, we can identify where there are potential gaps in assistance and where there's more of a need. Next slide. On this slide, you'll see our attachment checklist. This is the checklist that we provided for applicants to identify what are the supplemental documentation that are required as part of their application. Really, these help to determine financial viability, business need, level of emergency impact, proof that any award would not be duplicative of other funding sources, and that the application meets other funding source requirements. So you'll see examples on the slide if you can read that. Things like photo identification, tax returns, cost estimates, business financials. Really, these are all the types of things that we wanted to have to review to be able to look at business viability, to try to, protect our organization against fraudulent applications, all of those kinds of things where we would want to flag things for the board in our review. Next slide. Certification section. This is a very important part of the application. The applicant is really attesting and certifying that their application is true, accurate, and complete as of the date of submittal, that they're authorized to sign on behalf of their applicant entity, and that they understand the terms and conditions of the program, and that they'll abide by each of the program requirements included in the certification and the program guidelines. And there's quite a bit more in the certifications as well, things related to, certifying that they don't have any taxes in arrears, and that other forms of assistance, that they're not duplicating those other forms of assistance. So it's a really comprehensive certification for them to, certify to us that those things are all true and accurate. Next slide. Who's that monitoring? So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, reimbursement program. So in thinking in terms of closeout and monitoring, to draw down their single reimbursement payment, they would have to provide the following. They'd have to provide eligible receipts and invoices. Those invoices should have the date on them so we can verify that it wasn't prior to the eligible date. Scope of work, contractor or vendor name, contact information, cost, and be marked as paid or a zero balance. So really ensuring that those costs are what they said they were going to be, and that they're eligible costs at the end of the day. The program will be closed out 1 year from award notice, so October 2021, providing that the business provides a final report and 1 year of payroll subsequent to the award date to ensure that their employment levels have been maintained as required by the terms of their specific grant agreement for their funding source. And for CDBG grantees specifically, additional employee reporting may be required, including verification of the family income of persons filling created and retained jobs. And that's to measure the low and moderate income benefit for the CDBG program specifically. All of this documentation, including all of our reviews and everything, will be kept on file at the IDA along with their applications. Next slide. Internal review process. And I think Sarah might jump in on me a little bit on this, so I'm going to go through as much as I can. Staff completed a very intensive internal review process over an accelerated timeline, as you saw from the timeline on your slide earlier. And the main points here were application evaluation priorities. We strongly prioritize the DBEs in the application process, and you also see on the slide many of the other prioritizations that were developed in part of the scoring rubric. And then on the right-hand side, general evaluation. So is the applicant eligible? Is the use of the funds, use of the proposed use of funds eligible? Are they a business of strategic priority? What are the anticipated economic or employment impacts, target clusters, project readiness, all those types of good factors for a general review of a business development application.
And again, these are all directly out of the program guidelines, and so they were readily available for the applicants as well to help guide the depth of answers that they were providing in their application to help us understand how they met these priorities and the general evaluation criteria.
And so for on this slide, CADA specific review, I think there's a question mark there because they're not technically required of the grant applications, but we did factor these things into our evaluation anyway as a best practice So we did factor in creditworthiness, level of negative impact, proposed plan. All of those things were sort of above and beyond what the minimum requirements were for CADA funding requests, but we did look at those. And also I would add that this is above and beyond the standard eligibility review criteria. So this slide doesn't list like that it has to be in the city of Albany, that it has to be less than 50 FTEs, all of those basic criteria that were for all funding sources, for both funding sources. And then on the right hand of the side, the overall.
Sorry, Ashley, I'm just going to jump in there quickly just to make a note that when Ashley mentioned that this is not specifically required, again, if you go back to the amendment in the legislation for the grant program, there were very specific items. That particular amendment does talk quite a bit more about the loan program. And as we were hearing guidance, as we were working through the different webinars and sort of notes coming out of the state oversight bodies on the program, often that guidance would sort of conflate the grant program and the loan program. And so we wanted to just belt and suspenders, make sure that we were looking at all of the different items that applied to the loan program as well. And those are factored in, as Ashley's going to sort of run through the review documents. There were different tests that staff put each of the applications through and created notes on that, so that as a board, you can all be comfortable that we've done this review as well.
And then so the next part that I was just going to cover was, the internal review process, was founded in the overall principles that you have noted on the slide, really focusing on standardization. So how could we create a process that was streamlined, but yet also consistent across all of the applications for all of the applicants? So we created a predictable scoring rubric used for everyone. We established clear priorities, and these shaped what the evaluation was for the applications, and controlling for bias. So as much as we do have a small staff, we did have 3 reviewers on every single application to ensure that we had a primary reviewer that could focus on completeness and eligibility and really do that intense deep dive on the application and really be the lead. But then have 2 other reviewers to really control for that bias and balance the scores out so that everything would be fair for everyone involved in the process. And then plus, management level review for concerns across the board when, the reviewers flagged issues and concerns. So projects were raised up for that level of review, for supervisory review as well. And really this process focused, it was compliance driven. We're really trying to adhere as best as possible, way more strict probably than the rules even would require us for the state and federal rules, and understanding those state and federal guidelines, and really trying to put the burden on us as far as the evaluation and as far as measuring compliance. And so you'll see in the forms that I'm going to walk you through soon, we really wanted to have document for everything. So once again, burden on administrator, like it's not an insignificant amount of work for the staff, but it is, we felt that it was necessary for us to have the documentation for things like the completeness checklist and the eligibility checklist. So those are 2 of the things that you're seeing on the slides now. And why there are so many components on them is they really walk the reviewer through the completeness check item by item, and they can say yes or no whether it was there or not. So we wouldn't have to worry about, reviewers missing that there was something not in a specific application. It's all there and we can all note that off. And then as far as eligibility checklist, similar concept, having all of those eligibility components there for the reviewer to look at, evaluate, and mark a note for. And if there was concerns, they could be flagged for the supervisory review. So these, like I said, really step-by-step in helping walk the reviewers through this process. You've seen this workbook as a blank workbook before, so we're just kind of highlighting it again here today. These sheets, you'll see the CADA summary on your left and the CDBG summary on your right. We did these summary sheets, one for each funding source. We felt that while this was a program where we used both funding sources, because they have different regulatory requirements, we felt that it it was important and critical that we have separate review sheets for both programs. So we have this summary sheet. You have all received the CADA summary sheet. And just sort of, since it's a little hard to read today, it had some of the components it has on there. It has the employer identification number, which we've used as sort of a control for the application to follow it through the process. Applicant name, address, primary owner of the business, PPE versus non-PPE, so we could identify which funding sources it would have, a completeness status, so is it complete, is it eligible, total amount requested, so that amount on the right-hand side will be the amount requested from both CDBG and CADA. The average score, so the average score is obviously the average of the 3 reviewers that reviewed the application, and that's out of a max of 270 points. And then also along that right-hand side, you're going to get into things like the total CADA request. So that would specifically be just the CADA request. Minority, women, and veteran, there would be an X if the applicant designated themselves as a minority, a woman, or a veteran. Micro LMI, create or retain, that would be marked an X as well. Current employment, that would be the number of FTEs, so we can ensure that it's under the 50 or under. Jobs created or retained, those are all going to be not applicable on the CADA review sheets, on the CADA summary sheets, because job retention or creation is not technically required per the legislation, but it is required on the CDBG side of the funding source. So we do have that filled out for CDBG. You'll also have target geography, target clusters, level of COVID-19 impact. So you should see yeses on the first COVID-19 impact because that is in the legislation that they be impacted. Project costs, if you should see either a yes in the, or an X in the yes or in the no. If there's an X in the no, there should be a comment on the bottom of the latest review sheets that identifies, what was the ineligible cost or what was incurred prior to award, that kind of thing. I do want to note the big yellow boxes on the CADA summary sheet and on the CDBG sheet. Those are pulled directly from the applicant's application. So that is not edited by staff. That is a direct narrative from specific questions in the application that ask the applicant to elaborate on those items. So just noting that for the board. I think that's all I have on those, Sarah. And then now you're getting into the actual evaluation sheet. So this is where the actual rating system, the scoring happens on the evaluation sheet. That's how we get the average scores, by having the reviewers each complete one of those. And then on the right-hand side, the award calculation summary. So this is really a quick glance look at the budget for the application completed by the reviewer, so we can see what was their request, what was actually eligible based on funding sources, and then what is the determination for the award recommendation at the end of all the discussions.
Okay. So that gives you a really thorough overview. Thank you, Ashley, of the internal process that we had. We're going to come back to scoring in a minute, but sort of drum roll for the results of the program. We did throughout the process monitor general indicators on performance and prioritization throughout the program to ensure that the program was hitting the requirements of the legislation as well as the prioritization set in the program guidelines by the board. So we did have about 100, a little over 100 applications in total. Of those, we did have 12 that were either not in Albany. We had a couple from Texas and Florida, and there must be Albany's in those places somewhere that they got confused. But our marketing went viral apparently on our program. So we had a couple that were outside or either proactively withdrawn by the applicant. We did have one that came in late and was also not entirely complete. So that left us with 90 projects under consideration. Of those 90, 62 of them upon review were complete. So that meant that they had not only the pre-application questionnaire the application questionnaire, but also the supplemental material required, some level of that, a detailed budget, the financials that they were supposed to provide, the required documentation. 62 by the end of this extended deadline did come in complete. The total request was just under $800,000. And when we looked at the eligible components within that total request, we have $614,000 plus that we're recommending for award across both programs. Again, recall that we had up to $250,000 available for CADA and up to $250,000 available for CDBG. And we'll get into that in a second. We did track DBE applicants. We had 37, which amounted to 59, about 59-60% of the applicant pool. That does not include a number of nonprofits. We did have 12 nonprofits that applied for the program that cannot qualify as disadvantaged business enterprises because they're not owned. So those applicants may have marked that they were a DBE, but they wouldn't count into that 37 applicant number. In terms of the amount of funding requested by DBE applicants, $551,000, almost $552,000 was requested by DBEs. And when we're looking towards eligibility, it is about $400,000 that would be recommended based on eligibility. 64% of the overall recommended award would go toward DBEs. When we're looking at CADA specifically, so again, those top numbers, those are across the board, they're asking for, in most cases, both CADA and CDBG funding. Of the 62 complete applications, 51 of them did ask for CADA funding, so funding for reopening or protective equipment. That is 82% of the total applications that we received did ask for CADA funds. There was just under $140,000 requested of the CADA program, and of those requests, about $115,000 would be eligible. It leaves us with an average recommended award of about $2,200 per applicant for the award. And that does mean that we do have funding available if the board chooses to be able to award the requests that are in the pipeline for this program. In terms of DBE performance on the CADA applications, there were 34 of the 51, which is just about 67% of the applicants were DBE applicants. And they made up 62% of the total ask. And then it's 68% of the recommended award. Staff is recommending go toward disadvantaged business enterprises. Across the board on applications, we did very well on neighborhood strategy areas at about 70% of the applicants coming in from neighborhood strategy areas. In terms of coverage, we did have coverage throughout the city of Albany. There were applications from 14 different neighborhoods in the city. And again, 71% in our neighborhood strategy areas. There are 2 applications that you don't see on the screen here, only one for CADA, and that was the United Way, which is out in the dunes, out in the panhandle of the city. But we had representation throughout the city, and that was based on our marketing efforts as well. So again, in terms of results, we really want to make sure that the board, one, was aware of the process of sort of how we got here today, understanding the staff business decisions that went into this, the timeline extension that allowed us to reach 62 applicants instead of the original 20 that would have been eligible and on time. We did make a business decision related to folks that asked for more than they were eligible for. So if they were not a DBE, if they asked for more than $10,000 total, or if they were a DBE, if they asked for either more than $10,000 from each program or for more than $20,000 total, instead of deeming them ineligible, we did just prorate their asks down to the maximum amount that was eligible within their asks. Same thing on ineligible items. We did have a number of businesses that were asking for sort of strictly ineligible things like operational expenditures, back rent, utilities, things like that, alcohol, other specific items that were ineligible. Those were simply netted out of the recommended award. We did, however, have a number of applicants who asked for either PPE erroneously under the CDBG categories, or who asked for CDBG type items under the CADA categories. So again, instead of just deeming those ineligible, if there was room within their funding caps, we did move those into the appropriate ask columns, so into the appropriate funding sources. Also, we wanted to make sure that you understood our scoring process. Ashley sort of walked you through the review book, and you've seen this before. We did present on this at a previous meeting, but we had our priority areas that were hardwired in. Those were based on either yes or no, or very sort of black and white questions in the application document that provided priority points. Again, the scoring was a standardized scoring matrix that allowed businesses to score up to 270 points. 60 of those points could be achieved by being one or two or three of the three different DBE categories. Also, additional points within those priority areas, things like NSA, being in a commercial corridor, being a high risk business like a restaurant, daycare, arts and cultural institution during COVID, where we had some level of qualitative review. Again, and the reason for 3 scores was to standardize that review. We're in the 3 areas of business need, efficiency, and strategic value. Under each of those, there were 5 different indicators that scorers needed to score on, allowing businesses up to 150 points across the 3 categories. Those scores are reflective of not only the quality of the application, but also the completeness of the application. So where the scores were looking at things like business viability, a business that failed to provide significant or required documentation related to their interim business financials, for instance, or a exhaustive list of estimates on the ask that they were making, they would have received lower scores, and you'll see those lower scores reflected in the summary spreadsheet that you've been provided, and also on the CADA summary sheets that were there. We did that so that we really do have documentation that those items may prove risky. So if they're, we're looking at business viability for the program, if we didn't have enough documentation, you'll see a lower score on that. So that's something that the board can review and discuss. There are, however, a couple of board business decisions left out there to make. We'll get into some of those, the discussion of specific asks during executive session. But we had a number of businesses that asked for less than the $1,000 threshold that was in the program guidelines. And so you'll see in your staff recommendations, as required by the program guidelines, staff recommends 0 in those cases. We can have a discussion about the committee and board's appetite to make awards under $1,000. And then we did have a couple of outliers that were question marks for us, or areas that we do want the board to hear about a little bit more in depth as we make our decisions. And so with that, our next steps here today, we will open it up for a quick public comment period if there's anyone who wants to speak about any of the applications or the program in general. We'll then move into executive session to discuss the financial background of specific organizations, and then we would move forward with having the committee review and recommend approvals or denials to the board. So I'm going to stop sharing because it's driving me nuts that I can't see you all, and open it up for questions before we head into the public comment period.
Anybody? I'd say speak now, but forever hold your peace, but it won't be forever. Any particular projects, anyone have any questions on? I should say request for assistance rather than project. Okay. Well, in that case, I guess we'll open it up.
Is there any member of the public present who would like to speak about the program or any of the applications? I would note that those applications are available on the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency website. For every application that was received for IDA assistance through the SBAP program, sensitive business information was redacted from those posted publicly to ensure the privacy of the individuals who made the applications, but the bulk of the applications are up there per New York State requirement.
And Sarah, the record will remain open if people want to email in or mail in any sort of public comment.
We can. It's not. It isn't a public hearing. It's not a formal public hearing, but there is a public comment period. We do have to have this open today, but we will absolutely accept any emails or phone calls if necessary, and make sure that the board is aware of any public comment that we receive.
Great. I don't see anybody on the Zoom list who is not accounted for here, so I don't know if we have any other members of the public on.
There, we did have Scott. I don't know if he's still there from Peels on Wheels. And Scott, I don't know if you you had joined to make a public comment or just to listen in.
I did join just to listen in, just to learn more about what the status was, and if there's anything else that I could can offer, and to hear any public comments. So I'm good.
Great. With that, Chair, if you'd like to entertain a motion to enter into executive session to discuss the financial history of certain organizations, we could do that.
I would be happy to entertain that motion. Is there a motion?
So move.
Yep. I'll
Great.
second.
Tracy and Dominic second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so we'll enter an executive session.
Great, and I think we're going to, someone will be placing us into that session in just 1 second.
Executive session purgatory.
Exactly. Everybody clicks join the breakout room.
Everyone back?
We're working on it. I think as everyone's coming back, we can note that no action was taken during executive session.
Thank you. Good to go?
Okay. I think we're all back.
Okay.
I don't know why my video's not, oh, there it comes. Maybe that's where it's coming.
I think we are all back from executive session. As Sarah noted, no action was taken. We had discussions on some of the individual applications for the Small Business Assistance Program. I think we now have before us essentially recommendations by staff to approve applications for a number of businesses for their essentially PPE to assist the businesses going forward. I think for the purposes of a motion, I think we will, should we take a motion on the negative recommendation?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll ask for a motion for a negative recommendation on number 32 on the list, which is Color 89 LLC. Not because they are not worthy of assistance, but because they don't meet the criteria put forth in the program. We have a motion. Okay, Tracy, second.
I'll second it.
Dominic, all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. We then have, I'll call for a motion to table the request for number 46 on the spreadsheet, Grateful Villages Incorporated. We have some issues, I think, that we're going to try and hash out on whether or not the request can be appropriately granted under the program rules. So I'd call for a motion to table their request.
So moved.
Tracy, second.
No, second.
Dominic, all those in favor of tabling the request? Aye.
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 Okay. Any negative? All right. We also have 7 projects here that that nominally did not meet the program rules, not because they're not good, not appropriate businesses for assistance, but because their request either fell below the threshold or turned out to fall below the threshold of $1,000 once the request was sorted out. Those are number 9, Nocturnal Cookies on the spreadsheet, number 10, Miranda's Deli, number 12, the Kenmore Ballroom, number 37, Rocks, number 42, Eden's Rose Foundation, I believe, and number 47, Welcome Chapel Missionary Baptist Church, and number 48, Washington Tavern. I think I just want to make sure that that Eden's Rose is correct. I think on the spreadsheet.
It's Gorgeous Antiques.
Oh, Gorgeous Antiques?
Yep.
Okay. Gorgeous Antique, and for number 42, Eden's Rose, is that?
They withdrew.
They withdrew, okay. All right. So.
Can I just, Dennis, can I just make sure it's clarified that they met all the requirements other than the money threshold? Everything else was okay with their applications for the requirements?
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
And frankly, it seems rather foolish for us to not make an award for them because they came under a threshold of money needed for their application.
Right, yeah. Except for the staff time, but.
Right. So I think we have, I think I got all the correct applicants, correct? All right. So I call for a motion to approve those separately.
Sure.
Dominic?
Yes, I'll make the motion, yeah.
Second?
Right here, Tracy.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Finally, I think I asked for a motion to approve the remaining businesses and applications on our spreadsheet. I'm not going to go through and list them, but they're everything that we have not already approved or disapproved or tabled at this point, that list of 51. I think it's appropriate for the motion.
And that's at the levels, and sorry, that's just to clarify, that's at the levels recommended by staff based on eligible activities.
Correct. Do I have a motion for that?
So moved.
Tracy, second.
I'll second. Dominic.
Dominic. All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No one. All pass unanimously. All right. So I think we are done for now on that section of the meeting.
I do just, I want to pause a second here, and this is something that, and we'll do a little bit more of this at the board meeting next week, but I know, one, the team has been amazing on this program. I cannot say enough, particularly Ashley for her leadership of the program assistants coming in and, really working diligently to help businesses, but also just to have us as a group not lose sight of the fact that this was a tremendous amount of documentation. It was a lot of work to get to this point, but we are so very grateful to this board of directors for allocating this funding to be able to help this many small local businesses that make up such a huge part of our community and don't have opportunities for this type of assistance anywhere else. So what you all have just done is pretty amazing as a group. This is not something that is typically under the purview of the IDA or allowable by the IDA, but without hesitating, you jumped in to help local businesses. And I'm just, from our whole team's side and the community side, thank you very much for your recommendations today and working on this program. It means a tremendous amount to the community.
Yeah, and I also want to thank staff too. I know you put in, way beyond your time on this for what you get paid, and I really appreciate it. And I'm really sure the small businesses. My family owned a small business in Albany for 56 years. I know what it's like to be an established place, and one of the things we do get sometimes is people come up and they say, well, how come you're not doing anything with us? We've been here, or you're only helping the big projects. And I think this was a really significant project that we should be, as long as the law allows, and we do what we can for existing businesses and small businesses and women and minority owned and disabled and veteran owned businesses. It's I think it was, it's beyond just the money aspect. I think it's a great promotion for what the City of Albany IDA will do, given the chance to do it.
Yeah,
I concur, Dominic. I just wanted to, end with, I'm glad that we were able to get this much work done at the Finance Committee today. I will not be able to be at the board meeting next week. I hope and trust that this will all move forward at the board meeting based on the recommendations from the Finance Committee. So thanks to everyone for the hard work.
I would like to make one statement, if I might. It's somewhat in the same vein as Dominic's is. My son lives in Asheville, North Carolina. He just made application to the IDA there. He owns a barbershop. He was explaining to me the comprehensive nature of the application there and the need for him to identify other individuals who might be able to help him put that application together. So he called me and we talked about it. We worked our way through it, but the nature of this application and the comprehensiveness of it and the dedication it seems on the staff in order to be able to put such a beneficial program together in such a short amount of time, I think is something that's commendable. And I don't know whether you give gold stars out to staff on the IDA or not, but I think they definitely deserve something on that kind of level because small businesses are the backbone of what this country is about. And I think this action and this ability to be able to identify them and work with them and be able to give them, even if it's small amounts of money, if you got a small business, small amounts of money is what really helps you keep going. And I want to commend the staff for their ability to, in such a short period of time, to be able to put this beneficial package together to help small businesses in Albany. I just want to say congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, I think as Albany City Treasurer, I think I can officially designate you all Albany City Treasurers. So thank you.
Yes. There's your gold star.
That's the gold
We're
star.
all just punchy enough to be laughing hysterically at that too. It was a well-timed pun.
We do still have agency update to go through as well as other business. Let me just pull it back up here.
We don't have anything specific under agency update or compliance update to talk through. Again, since Tracy won't be here next week, we'll just note that the audit committee did meet and we'll have that audit moving forward under compliance update. Agency update we covered with Welcome Lloyd. We're so excited to have you here and thank you for jumping right into the deep end with us. We will be we'll be doing some sort of general introduction training. And then offering up, we're going to be talking with Hodgson Russ a little bit about those sort of standard board trainings that we've done periodically to get new members up and running. So that's it.
Looking forward to it. Looking forward to it.
And did I see that Anthony Gaddy is the other, will be joining us once Dominic retires
Yes.
from the board?
Yes.
Okay, terrific,
In January.
great. All right. So I guess I would call for a motion to adjourn.
You have one.
Tracy. Dominic second.
I'll second, yes.
All right, all
Thank
those in
you, everybody.
favor? Aye.